Whether you're halfway through a project, beginning a project, or completely done, one of the things you'll often want to do is make a copy of your existing media and a copy of your project files. It's always good to do a backup during the editing process as opposed to at the end. I can't tell you how many times people have come up to me and saying, I lost my video. I say, well, where's your backup? And they say, well, I wasn't done, so I didn't back it up yet. You should back up your media and you should back up your project files on a regular basis, because once it's gone, you have to reinvent the wheel from the beginning. So to do that, there's a nice thing within Premiere Pro called the Project Manager. And you can find that under the File menu at the very bottom of the list. Now, if you're on a Windows machine, you also will have your settings at the bottom of this list, as well as your keyboard shortcuts. Now, I'll select that, and I'm presented with this dialog box. And here I get to pick and choose if I'm going to copy and back up everything or if I'm going to refine it. For now, we're going to copy everything because I want a full backup because I'm still editing. I usually use the trim project and refine it for when I'm archiving because I want to save space and only save the stuff that I've used. So working on the copying or the moving strategy, let's take a look at the list from top down. The first thing I can choose is, do I want to export all of my sequences and their associated media? And sometimes I do, especially if it's at the very beginning, and other times I may have done some stuff that I don't need to save or I don't need to hand off to somebody else. For instance, I have this experimenting sequence, which is kind of a sandbox where I played with things, and one of the things I played with was multicam. So I don't need that. And before I make these changes, I do want to point out that right now it's 575 megabytes, or about 575. But if I choose not to copy these sequences, and I'm going to click on Collect Files and Copy to a New Location, if I hit the Recalculate button, you'll notice that both of these numbers change. First of all, if I'm going to be copying everything, I'm copying files that I didn't use within my project, okay? So I have a resulting size that's smaller, 1.4 gigabytes. But I'm still not copying elements that I used in these two sequences. Let me go ahead and turn those back on, and I'm going to go ahead and uncheck that and hit Calculate again, and you'll see that I have the full 1.7. This number never changes till you press the Calculate button. So don't make the mistake of making all the changes and then thinking that didn't make a difference. Make sure you press the Calculate button. So let's go ahead, uncheck these two again. I don't want to create a trimmed project. I really want everything there. And these are some of the key things that we can modify. Now, depending on what we chose above, some will be grayed out and some won't be. And we'll explore those different options momentarily. I can choose if I want my preview files, these are your render files, to be saved. And I generally don't do that because I assume I can always re-render when I open up my timeline. And the same thing is true with audio conform files. These aren't that big, and a lot of times I like to just restart from scratch. This is the dangerous one. If I click on Rename Media Files to match the clip names, if I've changed their names over here, it's going to create new media with new names. This could be a good thing if I'm using, say, P2 cards that don't have any description about what the file looks like. Or it could be a bad thing if somebody else is going to use this media and they only know it by its original name. So be careful because this could make relinking a little more of a challenge. I can then choose where I want the files to go, and I can browse to another part of my hard drive if I want to just make a copy there, or I could browse and export it to another internal drive if it's available on my machine, or to an external drive for me to save as a backup off-site or to send to somewhere else. Once all these decisions are made, I always hit the Calculate button again, and as you see, by cutting out all the preview and audio conform files, I've actually cut it down by 2/3 of the files that I needed to actually save and move to continue working on this project on another machine or just put it on the shelf as a backup. When all this is said and done, I would press OK, and the new project is created. Now, once all the media has been copied, this is what the end result looks like. It has all the clips that I used in my project, and it names the project after the original because basically this is simply a copy. If I double-click to launch this, you'll notice that this is the exact same timeline, but I no longer have that experimental folder. And if I scroll down, there is all of my media organized exactly how I expect it to be. And because I didn't copy my render files, I might have to render a few things for real-time playback if I'm on a slower machine. There's one big difference you need to keep in mind when you make a backup copy of a project. Even though the organizational structure is still maintained inside your project file, when you look at where the media has been moved to, and let me hide Premiere Pro, all of your media has been copied to the top level. So it doesn't put things back inside their original folders or a copy of their original folders. All of your media is put into a giant folder, and the project can find it, but that organization structure is gone. Let me jump back into Premiere Pro and show you one more very useful thing when you're working or collaborating with somebody on a single project. I can use the project manager and change one option, and it becomes very, very valuable. Instead of collecting all my files, I'm going to switch back to creating a new trimmed project, and I'm going to say Make Offline. Watch what happens when I hit Calculate. You'll notice that it has dramatically dropped to 700 kilobytes, which is practically nothing. Now, this is really useful if you're collaborating and you're only working on one of those sequences. So they'll get the project file, everything will be offline, and they simply can relink it to the media that you managed earlier and sent them on a hard drive. It's a great way to collaborate. The other way you could do things is you could just send them a copy of your current project file, but the challenge there is if you only gave them part of the media, they'll only be able to reconnect some of the clips, and it could be a little more frustrating for the person you're collaborating with. I'd recommend playing around with different variations that you can get by checking and unchecking some of these boxes to gain a better understanding of how the project manager can work with and copy your files.